Okay, so now that you've got the fundamentals of integrating with Sauce Labs under your belt, it's time for the big show. So now I'm going to show you how to retrofit a layered robot framework script so that it can be integrated with Sauce Labs. This is more realistic of what you would really do in production. So let's have an overview of these steps first, then we'll go through and we'll execute them one by one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the layered Selenium 2 project that you can get from the level 1 course. Inside that project, we're going to create the remote URL and desired capabilities variables that we did in the previous video. Then we will add the remote URL and desired capabilities to our open browser keyword, which now lives inside common begin web test. Then we will add a custom saucelabs.py library to our project, which uses an API call to report our test results back to Sauce Labs. Then we will add a reference to this custom Sauce Labs library in common.robot because that's where it's used. Then we'll add the Sauce Labs library keyword called upload test result to common and web test. And finally, we'll run the script and override the desired capabilities variable from the command line to easily switch platforms like we did before. So let's take it step by step. So I've got the layered robot framework project open that we created in the level 1 course. You can see that it's got the Amazon.robot test script, which has several tests, and it also has the test setup and teardown, which both live in common, and that's up here in resources, common.robot, and the Amazon.robot file holds all of these keyword definitions that exist in our test steps. And of course, we've got our page objects, which is what the Amazon robot file uses to do all of its work. Each of these page objects has a reference to the Selenium 2 library because that's where the heavy lifting is being done. So now we've got to figure out how to make this thing run on Sauce Labs. So since we started with the layered Selenium 2 project from level 1, step 2 is to create the remote URL and desired capabilities variables. Let's do that. For the sake of time, I'm just going to paste those in. But as you recall, the remote URL here is this URL that points at Sauce, which begins with my username, and then this key, both of which are obtained from the Sauce Labs website. Desired capabilities, I'm passing in the name attribute, platform, and browser name with version. There are other attributes we can pass in here, but we're going to talk about that in a later video. So moving along to the next step, now we have to add the remote URL and desired capabilities to our open browser command, and that lives in common begin web test. So we'll drill here into resources, common.robot, and here you see we have our open browser, which is just opening to about blank and passing in the browser variable that we get from the script out here. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste in something different here, which is still open browser with about blank and browser, but now I'm adding in remote URL and desired capabilities. And both of these are pointing at those variables that we created out here in the script. So the next step is to add a custom saucelabs.py library to your project, which uses an API call to report test results back to Sauce Labs. Here's why that's important. In the past videos when we ran our tests, you can see that the test result always has a question mark by it, even though we know they passed. And also, the name that shows up here for the test cases is just a random string that I'm passing in instead of the actual name of our test case. So adding this custom Sauce Labs API library will give us the ability to report that information back from our computer over to Sauce Labs. Now, I didn't write this particular library. I found it at this gentleman's website here. Asko Suka, I guess his name is. He's got a lot of great stuff. And you can see he's got a post here from March 20th where he articulates how to set all this stuff up. And then down here, he wrote this API library, which gives us the ability to send our results back to Sauce Labs using an API call right there. So check his blog out. He's got a lot of cool stuff. So I have added that library into my project at the root level. And if we double click to open it, I've modified it a little bit. So I have an update Sauce Labs test name method and also an update Sauce Labs test result method, which also updates the name as well. I can call this at the beginning of my test just to make sure that the test case name gets updated as soon as possible. Then when the test case finishes, I can call this update Sauce Labs test result and pass back the status and any tags that we might have attached to our test case. So now the next step is that we need to reference the custom Sauce Labs library in common.robot. And all that means is that we're going to jump over to common.robot here, expand our settings area, and underneath our Selenium 2 library, we're going to add in another library with 2 spaces, and we type in the name of the file, Sauce Labs, without the extension. And now we need to add a Sauce Labs library upload test result keyword to our common end web test. So you can see that this is how we're initiating our contact with the Sauce Labs browser cloud. Now down here in end web test, before the browser closes, we want to make that API call to report our test case name and status back to Sauce. So I'm going to go ahead and just paste that in right here to save time. And you can see I've added some comments here. This line updates the test case name, result, and tags in the saucelabs.com UI after the test case is completed, but before closing the browser. The reason why we have to do this before closing the browser is that this library depends on the Selenium session ID to be able to track down which test case it needs to update. If you close the browser, that session ID is gone. So these values you see right here that are being underlined are actually global variables that are part of the robot framework infrastructure. So you can see that what we're going to do is we're going to say run keyword if our remote URL is not empty, which of course up here it's not because we're going to pass in a remote URL right there. If that remote URL is not empty, we're going to make this update Sauce Labs test result call, which lives in the Sauce Labs library, which is right here. That's this guy right here, update Sauce Labs test result. We're passing in the name, the status, an array of tags, and our remote URL. As I mentioned, it'll grab the session ID by using a built-in library call. Then it will prepare the headers, which includes the name and the tags that we supplied up here as parameters. Then it's going to use a API put to send that information back to Sauce Labs. And finally, it'll parse this response text right here in order to strip out the video URL, and it'll insert the video URL into our results log that'll be living right up here. So that's what this update Sauce Labs test result keyword does down here in end web test. And that's really pretty much it. We've got our remote URL and desired capabilities variables. We've added those to our open browser keyword. We've pulled in this API call to report our test results back to Sauce. We've got a reference to it in common.robot because that's where it's used. And finally, we're making that API call to upload the test result when the test is done. Now we simply have to craft our command line with desired capabilities to run the test. And I'm just going to paste that in here. This gives you an example of what it looks like. Pybot-d results. That would put my results file into this results directory here. And now I'm using -v to pass in my desired capabilities, and you can learn how to do that in the level 1 video. And again, you can see I'm passing in my name string here to identify it in the Sauce Labs UI up until the point that the API call replaces that with the actual test case names. I'm passing in Windows 7 for the platform. My browser name is Chrome, version 39. And I'm going to invoke the tests amazon.robot. So there's a weird redraw problem down here. When I paste this in down in the terminal window, you won't be able to see the whole thing, but just trust that that's what I'm using here. I'm going to comment it out up here so it won't complain. Paste it in down here and hit run. You can see the suite kicks off, and if we pull open Sauce Labs, we see the test executing. And now notice when the test finished, it put a passed check mark here and renamed the test case name with the suite name and the test case. And you can see each test case as it fires reports that random string that I'm supplying in the name attribute until the test is finished. Then the API call replaces it with the test case name and the status of the test case. Pretty cool. And now, like I told you, I modified that API to replace the test case name sooner, right after the browser opens. But of course, making that API call adds a little bit of overhead to the whole thing and will slow your tests down. So if you don't need to see your test case names appear right away, you don't necessarily have to add that. But I can show you how that works right now. So if we drill back into resources, common.robot, the same place where we make the API call before we close the browser, let's make that same API call right after we open the browser. And you can see I've added a comment. This line is optional if you want to see your test case names sooner in the saucelabs.com UI. It can only be run after opening a browser because we need that session ID. So I'm saying run keyword if remote URL is not empty. This time we're going to update the Sauce Labs test name instead of updating the Sauce Labs test results. we're simply going to pass in the suite name and the test name along with the remote URL. So this is just a small modification of that Sauce Labs API library. I'm going to invoke this instead of this. Now, when I'm using Sauce, I like to use maximize browser window simply because we may be dealing with a responsive website and get unpredictable results if we don't open the window up full size. So let's run this one more time with a different command passing in different desired capabilities. This time I'm going to pass in Mac OS with Safari 8. So I'll grab that command right there, paste it down here in my terminal, and hit run. Now this time we should see the test case name update more quickly than it did last time. So it still shows this random username at the beginning, but once the browser is open, it switches the test case name while the test case is still running. Then when the test case is done, it adds the test result and moves on to the next test case. And again, when that browser window opens, it switches that test case name and so on. And notice here we're running on Mac OS and Safari 8 instead of Windows 7 and Chrome 39 like we did last time. And if I want to view a test case in real time, I can just click on that link and it automatically loads the live video for the test case so I can see it happen in real time. Typing in the keyword, just clicking on the product, probably clicking add to cart over here, and now verifying some text. So back on the dashboard, I can see another test case is running. And over here on my computer, I can see that the console is still chugging along, so there's one more test case running. And now that one is passed, everything is passed. I can go look at my test results in my log. And as you can see, all of our test cases have passed. And if you drill into it, we've got our nice layers here, including our page objects and so on. So we've done it. We've modified our layered project to run on saucelabs.com. That wasn't too hard, was it?